Peace advocates and political leaders gather in a public hearing on Thursday to discuss the next four-year policy framework, which has been presented in the latest National Development Plan submitted by the Colombian government. The document has drawn wide criticism as it does not appear to be coherent with the historic moment the country is facing.
The budget for defense and security is going to be 3 times higher than the one for education and 6.5 times higher than the one for health. Also, it's a plan where peace is meant to be implemented by business people. Rural development is conceived as large-scale mining and agribusiness, and major infrastructure projects are carried out. Everything without taking into account social actors that are crucial for peace.
As the plan is entitled Peace, Equality and Education, paradoxically it seems to be reproducing the same model that for decades have driven the country into deep inequalities.
This development plan reflects this government's schizophrenic model. Peace is supposed to be central to this plan, but then the way rights such as access to health, education, employment, even access to culture are meant to be implemented, they continue to come under the umbrella of the neoliberal model.
Access to land has historically been at the center of Colombia's struggles. Now, it seems like victims struggling for land restitution will have to wait to see if their lands happen to be considered by the government as strategic for big-scale mining and energy projects, as well as agribusiness.
Those lands will not be available for restitution. Instead, the victims will be economically compensated, which I believe will worsen the damage, as the biggest hope for a victim that has been displaced from their land is in fact to be able to return, to be able to work the land. The victim is not expecting money as a solution to the situation.
As the government has also increased the national budget for security and defense, peace supporters as well as victims continue to demand that the decisions taken in Colombia remain coherent with what is being discussed in Havana as the peace process advances. From Bogotá, Natalia Margarita, teleSUR.
With 1 week till the date marking 5 months since the 43 Ayotzinapa students were disappeared by police in Guerrero, families of the students and social organizations here in Mexico City say the case is not forgotten with time and continue to demand justice.
Hopefully, God willing, you will not be indifferent and this won't happen to you, where one day they come to your home and disappear your family members.
However, many of the students here organizing this rally do admit that the widespread participation in the movement for Ayotzinapa has dropped in recent weeks. They blame the reduction on the government's strategy of declaring the investigation closed, as well as a smear campaign against activists.
I think we're going through a complicated time, even for those of us who are organised, because we're coming out of a period of vacations and now we're confronting a wave of declarations from a government smear campaign.
Yet some families of Mexico's other 23,000 disappeared say that they seek to move beyond marches and government reforms so as to find their loved ones.
We see there is a lack of attention towards those families of the disappeared. It is only a topic that people take advantage of politically, so we have decided to work alongside the families and work together.
For Maria Herrera, who for the past 8 years has been searching for 4 of her missing sons, the emotional loss families of the victims feel needs to be converted into a tool for change.
This pain, this uncertainty that we carry inside us, we would like it to serve for something, for society.
Meanwhile, the families of the 43 students say they will continue to search for international support and intervention, hoping that the external pressure will push Mexico's authorities in delivering truth and justice in the case. Clayton Khan, teleSUR, Mexico City.
According to official numbers, in Honduras there is an impunity of at least 96% in homicides, although there's proven corruption in some police agency and almost a complete inefficiency in the court system. The lack of criminal investigation is probably the main reason for impunity. Now, after almost 15 years, Honduras will have once again a crime investigation agency with the recently announced Technical Crime Investigation Agency, ATIC.
They are civilians, not police. They received 3 months training in crime scene analysis. The first ATIC graduates are 95 agents in San Pedro Sula and Tequisquiapan, divided between homicides, sexual felonies, and the fight against drug trafficking.
Ivania Galeano is a lawyer that works with women's organizations and has been demanding an end to impunity in the murder of women. She, like other lawyers, has hopes in this new agency.
There is hope because we have had a deficient or almost non-existent criminal investigation policy. The government decided in the late 1990s to separate the investigation team of the public prosecutor and pass it over to the security minister, and we have seen impunity rates grow consistently since.
The agency is still very small and it accepts that it doesn't have the capacity to investigate all cases. Currently, they are focusing on high-profile cases, and in June they will have 150 new agents. This development is the first international recommendation adopted by the Honduran government after numerous reports and recommendations over the last 5 years of how to improve the security problem in the country. Gerardo Torres, teleSUR, Central America.
The salaries of close to 50% of Peruvians are tied to the minimum wage. However, the country has one of the lowest minimum wages in the region, approximately $250 per month, and estimates claim you need twice as much to be able to support a family.
With this minimum wage, you have to work on the side. I wash clothes or even cook somewhere so that I can survive.
To cover the expenses, I have to work extra hours and do little jobs on Saturdays and Sundays. You have to do it or else you don't have enough.
I worked for companies and I have left them because what they pay is not enough.
According to analyst Fernando Villaran, the political situation in Peru has become favorable for an increase in the minimum wage as political leaders openly support it, and they are responding to a general sense that such is the will of the majority of citizens. He also stated that the change in the political atmosphere was due to the new youth labor movement that has been taking over the streets of Lima with a series of protests.
In 2 months, or even less, the political conjuncture has changed, and the humour of the parties too, but led by a youth movement that has demanded an agenda with more rights and even a change in the whole labour rights legislation.
Such change has reduced the political power of business associations that were able to set the economic agenda before. The executive branch has now proposed to raise the minimum wage, and diverse political forces in Congress claim to support the measure. The idea is also that with such an increase, internal consumption will rise, and this will help the slowing economic growth. Reporting from Lima, Peru for teleSUR, Rael Mora.
3 days of meetings between government leaders, the private sector, and civil society to address the global threat of terrorism. One of their conclusions, vulnerable youth are ripe for terrorist recruiting, and it's imperative that community leaders reach them before extremists do.
We must acknowledge that groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIL are deliberately targeting their propaganda to Muslim communities, particularly Muslim youth.
Connecting Islam with terrorism outright would have meant fierce criticism, but Muslim American youth activists still felt ostracized. People like Yasmina Marabet, who says surveillance and targeting of the Muslim community should have been a part of the debate.
Anytime someone finds out that I'm Arab or I'm Muslim, I get asked all these questions. What do you think about what the terrorists are doing? Why do you think they're doing this? Where in the religion does it say this?
For Yasmina, local communities in the United States bear no connection to groups like ISIS or Boko Haram. Instead, she asks herself why attacks by Caucasian nationalists and other far-right organizations are so often ignored.
There's no logic that would tell you to go from those beheading videos to reach out to Muslim youth in the United States. That's just as shocking and disgusting to us as it is to everyone else in the United States. We don't agree with that. We don't support that.
As the FBI investigates the recent killings of 3 young Muslims in North Carolina, doubts surface about whether they were targeted over a parking space or their faith. Many have asked, what if the killer had been Muslim?
That rising tide of anti-Muslim rhetoric that we're seeing in newspapers and television, and particularly on social media, it really does have a negative impact on young people in America who will spend their lives here.
Hate crimes against Muslims in 2015 are 5 times higher than they were before 9/11, and poll data suggests that Muslim Americans tend to underreport when they've been a victim. Evidence that begs the question, perhaps fighting violence worldwide begins with fighting violence at home first. Alexandra Hall, teleSUR, Washington.
Israel's protective edge operation on Gaza, 3 13-story residential housing towers were destroyed, including the Al-Basha building, the Al-Zafar Tower, and the Italian compound, all which were leveled by the airstrikes, leaving over 200 Palestinian families displaced. Today, looking at the current situation in the Gaza Strip with the closure of borders, officials said that the reconstruction of Gaza Strip might take at least 10 years. Mufid al-Hassaina, the Palestinian Minister of Public Works and Housing, said that the ministry has laid a cornerstone for the reconstruction of the 13 floors destroyed Al-Zafar Tower.
The rebuilding of these towers is a significant event and is the start of the rebuilding of all towers destroyed during the war. The Palestinian ministry will continue all efforts to distribute aid money to people whose houses were partially damaged and hand out mobile homes and construction materials to those who lost their homes completely.
Israeli attacks on Gaza during the 51-day offensive on the Strip killed over 2,200 Palestinians, mostly civilians, and it was reported that more than 10,630 buildings were destroyed, leaving over 250,000 Palestinians displaced. Noor Harazin, teleSUR TV, Gaza.
The Al-Ba'ath Party, in coordination with the National Union of Syrian Students, held a consultation meeting to discuss the main difficulties students are facing.
Today, there are many ideas from the students to develop the academic work. We didn't stop giving the scientific lectures, and we worked to make it better using all the possible means. In Syria, we believe in education.
Our educational institutions have been targeted, whether as terrorist thoughts or terrorist assaults. They attacked architecture faculty with mortar shells, and recently the so-called Islam Army armed group was responsible.
The National Union of Syrian Students is the main link between the Syrian universities. Amjad is an Arabic literary student who sees a big role for this union in helping students.
We need supports, and the efforts are affected due to the armed groups' continuing attacks. Many students were frightened and flee out the country, but the majority stayed, and we will work together to build the country again.
The Syrian universities, including all their departments and faculties, continuing to withstand the hardships caused by the violent internal war the country is living, placing their hopes on the youth who represent the future. Nashwan Abdullah, teleSUR, Damascus, Syria.